Right now, we're seeing a major winter storm impact the northern Great Lakes area as well as the northeast, and we could see a significant Arctic blast as we approach late week and into early next week as a result of the strong northwesterly winds associated with this low pressure system. If we were to continue to move forward with the European model's depiction, of course, this storm system is eventually expected to move out. Right now, it's bringing heavy snowfall throughout the interior portions of the northeast, but most of the northeast is now under the threat of rainfall, and the rain could be heavy at times, so you want to pay close attention to that during your evening commute. And continuing to move forward, we see that this storm begins to intensify, and we see a strong enough northwesterly flow to bring that jet stream further southward and to force that Arctic air further southward. So as a result, temperatures should be much colder than average for much of the eastern half of the United States. And of course, we're going to need to pay close attention to our next major snowstorm threat that could impact the Midwest as we approach this weekend into early next week. First, we're going to pay close attention to this Clipper system. The European model is forecasting to move further southward. So you should expect, I'd say, anywhere from 1 to 3 to maybe a little bit more than 3 inches of snow in localized areas of the northern Midwest. This Clipper system will be relatively weak. This should approach the northern Midwest by the Friday timeframe. And moving forward, we do see that there isn't a lot of instability for this low pressure system to work with because there isn't a high level of cold air that's just to the east of this storm to create enough lift for this storm to intensify as it heads further eastward. And there isn't necessarily just a very convective environment for this storm to intensify. So as a result, it will maintain its strength at around the low 990s, but it's not going to be a major snow producer. As like I said, you should mainly expect 1 to 3 inches of snow throughout portions of the northern Midwest. However, this next low pressure system just behind it that should approach the Pacific Northwest by the late week will be a little bit more significant, because if we were to move a little bit further back, we do see that this will be another Alberta Clipper coming a little bit further from the west, and this will move far south enough to encounter the warmer and more moist environment that's located in the southeast for this storm to be a little bit more potent and bring some heavier snowfall to portions of the Midwest where we do see the snow. I'd say this snow would bring maybe around 3 to 6 inches to the northern portions of Nebraska and the southern portions of South Dakota, and Chicago could get involved with potentially over 6 inches of snow. The European model is expecting a little bit less snowfall than the GFS model at this time. Really all depends on how significant the jet stream dip will be behind this trough that's expected to move into the midsection of the country. We're going to need to wait and see how much cold air will be locked in place in the Midwest to really determine the amount of instability and, as a result, the amount of convection we should see in the Midwest to determine how significant this snowstorm will be. But for the northern Midwest, you could get pounded by another significant snowstorm if we were to see just enough instability. And this goes around this approaches Saturday, January 28th. So I will say that certainty with this Clipper system is very high at this point. We could see some smaller variations with the forecast, but I think the low pressure system will likely move in this general direction. It seems like the computer models have honed in on where exactly the jet stream will position itself. However, still a pretty marginal difference when it comes to the strength of the low pressure systems between the two main computer models. The European model forecasting a weaker scenario, while the GFS model is a little bit stronger in bringing heavy snowfall to the Midwest associated with this trough. We're going to need to wait and see which computer model will end up being the more correct one, but I will emphasize that the European model has been the more correct model this winter. So I lean a little bit more to European models forecast, and then we eventually do see the snow move into the northeast by the Sunday timeframe, January 29th. And we do see numerous rain showers just to the south of this low pressure system. So the interior northeast might get involved with snowfall as well. And I know what many of you guys watching in the Northeast are thinking, especially up along the coast, that man, this might be another trough where you're only going to experience primarily a rain event, and unfortunately, it is likely that this will be a rain event for much of the coast, as it seems like this ridge is just going to be too strong, like we've seen countless times this winter so far, where the ridging is just too strong, the southerly winds are too strong, so temperatures are going to be a little bit too warm up along the coast to receive any sort of snowfall, and that's expected to continue over the next week or two, which is definitely unfortunate if you're into the snow right up along the interior Northeast, but that's the reality of how it's looking like over the next week or two, so you want to pay very close attention to that. We might not see the temperature become cold enough right up along the immediate coast until maybe middle February, and this could be one of the more quiet winters for much Northeast. And then the European model eventually does, in the more long-term future, bring another trough that does bring significant snow to the interior Northeast and the Midwest, but still very far in the future. And again, this is bringing rain up along the Northeast coast as a result of a strong ridge that's still persistent up along the eastern half of the United States. So at this point, it seems like we're going to see a major winter storm pattern develop in the Midwest as we approach next week as well. So Chicago and Detroit, you need to pay close attention to the interior Northeast. And so I'll keep you guys updated over the next several days, as certainty for the next two Clipper systems that should approach by this weekend are very high. This first one should bring a small amount of snow to the northern Midwest, and then the second one, it's going to be interesting to see where that jet stream positions itself, because this could maybe be a rain event for Chicago if the jet stream positions itself a little bit further northward. But at this point, I'd say more likely we're going to see a snow event in Chicago, and this could be significant depending on the instability. But I'll keep you guys updated. We're going to also need to pay close attention to this trough and the exact position of the jet stream for the eastern half of the United States, because while it seems like you're mostly going to experience rain events along the coastal Northeast, it's far from certain, especially this far out. We could maybe see the jet stream dip a little bit further southward if we were to see the stronger northerly flow associated with these next few troughs moving through. So I wouldn't rule out that possibility, but it's definitely not looking good when it comes to snowfall up along the Northeast coast, at least for next week. But I'll keep you guys updated. The GFS model is showing a very similar forecast to the European model. The GFS model wants to bring a Clipper system. It does bring it a little bit further southward, but we mainly see the around the same amount of snowfall accumulation. It's only marginally further southward than the GFS model, and then we do see that just behind it, we see the same Clipper system move into the Midwest, and it is a little bit stronger, as the GFS model does expect more instability, and this storm to be more formidable as it approaches the Midwest and the interior Northeast, but it brings snowfall to much of the same area. So I will say the trajectory is still fairly certain, still a little bit more uncertain when it comes to its strength, but you should expect a general area of 3 to 6 to maybe 5 to 8 inches in some areas of the Great Lakes, such as Chicago and Detroit, could get involved with potentially up to, if not over 6 inches of snow with this snowstorm. So definitely keep that in mind. And we see a very similar jet stream position as the European model with the GFS model. It wants to bring the jet stream dip sort of in this vicinity. So much of the northern Midwest will experience temperatures well below average, and then for the Northeast, temperatures, at least for the interior Northeast, might be a little bit more below average, but more so right around average, I'd say, for the most part. The GFS model does want to bring some snow as we approach February or early February. We do see a pretty significant snowstorm impact the Northeast, but it's still highly uncertain, and there's still a lot of days to go to really iron out that forecast. And the GFS model has been trending on bringing a little bit more rain up along the coast than before, so we could maybe see a trend where the GFS model again is trying to lean more to the European model, which definitely would reduce the chance of snow up along the coast if that were the case, since the European model is expecting any snowfall, at least for the foreseeable future, up along the northeast coast. But it's definitely something interesting to watch. The position of jet stream will be very important to determine who will get the heaviest snowfall. But I'd say this general area of the Midwest, right around the midsection between the Canadian border and the U.S.-Mexico border, will experience the heaviest snowfall, including Chicago. Des Moines could get involved, and much of the northern Midwest, I'd say, will get involved with snowfall over the next week, as it seems like the jet stream, we're going to see just enough of a jet stream dip for a snowstorm pattern to develop. In terms of the amount of snowfall the GFS model expects over the next week, we do see that the next snowstorm for the Chicago area could be significant, where you could experience over 6 inches of snow. Detroit would also get involved with 6 to 12 inches of snow. A little bit of Cleveland as well, with right around 3 to 6. Des Moines, 3 to 6 inches of snow is possible with this next snowstorm expected to move through by the weekend, so you want to pay close attention to that. And then portions of southern South Dakota and northern Nebraska could experience over 6 inches of snow as well, so you want to pay very close attention to that. The European model is showing a very similar forecast. Just ignore the snow that you see that's moving southward into Pennsylvania and New Jersey. This was from a snowstorm that just recently passed through those areas, so ignore those areas. But for much of the Midwest, you could experience 3 to 6 inches of snow associated with this next snowstorm expected to approach the Midwest by Saturday timeframe, including Chicago, where again you could experience over 6 to 12 inches of snow, and maybe a little bit more than a foot in some areas of Michigan associated with this next snowstorm, so you want to pay close attention to that. And then South Dakota as well could get involved with 3-6, and then around 1 to 3 inches for much of northern Midwest associated with this next clipper system that's going to move just before the weekend. So in northern Minnesota and North Dakota, you want at least pay close attention to that for the possibility of slick road conditions. Taking a look at the snowstorm that's going on right now, we do see that there's plenty of snowfall going on in the interior northeast, but we are seeing that transition over to rain in the Boston metropolitan area, and then we should begin to see more transitions occur as the slow pressure system continues to head further northeastward. Just pay close attention to very heavy snowfall around the Adirondack mountain region, as well as portions of Maine and New Hampshire for your evening commute. But this should end within the next few hours. Taking a look at the Futurecast radar to see when you should expect the snow to end for many of these areas in the interior northeast. So in Maine, the snow should get heavier, and then in southern Vermont and New Hampshire, the snow will eventually transition into rain, which should help wash away a lot of that snow. And then we should see the heaviest snowfall very early on Thursday for much of Maine, before eventually we see that transition into rain, I'd say by the noon time on Thursday. And then the snow for the storm for the most part should be out of the northeast by the afternoon on Thursday. So here's my forecast when it comes to the possibility of major snow over the next week. So throughout portions of Des Moines, Detroit, Chicago, even Milwaukee, Cleveland, a large portion of the interior northeast, you need to pay close attention to the possibility of significant snowstorm moving through by the weekend, where we should see it develop right around the midsection of the country and then continue to intensify as it heads further northeastward, where the Chicago area could maybe get involved with 6 to 12 inches of snow, and Detroit as well. And the northern Midwest, keep in mind at least for maybe 1 to 3 inches of snow with this next Clipper system moving through. That's going to be won't be associated with the Clipper system moving through Chicago, but it should be a smaller snowstorm. So just pay close attention to the possibility of slick road conditions with this next immediate Clipper system that should move just before the weekend in the northern Midwest. But thank you guys for watching.